Today we are going to live loop samples in one-shot mode on the SP-404 MKII. We will be using classic roots reggae sounds to create a dub mix. The steps include copying the samples to the SP-404 MKII using the desktop app, changing the settings of all of the samples so they are ready for one-shot mode, setting up your project for live looping, performing the dub mix using pad mute mode and the 404's effects. When you have a large group of files that you need to import into an SP-404 MKII project, I find it much faster to use the 404's software to do this. This is also helpful because you can use your computer's file browser to filter out samples of the same BPM or key as long as they are labeled or tagged that way. I have a pack of roots reggae samples from Loopmasters that I will be using for this demonstration. Of course, you could use samples that you've created yourself. The important part to make this work properly is that the samples are perfect loops and are all the same BPM. Begin by copying all of your samples to your pad bank. Filling one bank with samples will probably be enough. Then, set all of your samples to one-shot mode by clicking on the one-shot checkbox. Now, change the BPM for all of your samples to the same value. It's good to do this manually so that you know that you have them all set correctly. The samples I am using are all 135 beats per minute, so that's what I will set them to. Unfortunately, you can't key the BPM into the app with your keyboard. You have to use the slider provided. Use your mouse's scroll wheel to move the value up and down in larger increments. You can now see that all of your samples are evenly spaced in multiples of 4 beats in the waveform view of the app. It doesn't matter if your samples have different bar lengths. That is the advantage of using one-shot mode. Each sample will play all the way through to the end, no matter how long it is. Now we can move over to the SP-404 MKII. The first thing we need to do is make sure the tempo of the project or pad bank matches the BPM of the samples. Here I will change it to 135 beats per minute. Once that is done, we can start programming a pattern to loop our samples. Press the record button and choose a pattern. Change the length of the pattern to 1 bar using Control Dial 2. Press the Remain button to switch to TR-Rec mode. Then press Record. You will now use the subpad to select all of the samples you want to play in the pattern and set them all to trigger on the very first beat. When you are finished, press Exit to stop the recording. Test out the pattern. The pattern is continuously looping through only 1 bar, but each of the samples that are being triggered on the first beat are playing all the way through, no matter how long they are, and are not re-triggered until they finish playing. Since everything is synced to the same BPM, the samples always re-trigger on the very first beat of the pattern. This is the advantage of one-shot mode. Now comes the fun part. Using pad mute mode, we can play the looping pattern and mute out different samples to create a live performance. Using the SP-404 MKII's effects, we can give this performance a classic dub sound. The signature of the dub sound is the stripping back of different instrumental parts of the beat and manipulating them with studio effects. The SP-404 MKII can closely replicate this. Normally, a dub producer would use a mixing board to isolate these instrumental parts and manipulate them using the channel faders and external effects plugged into the mixer. With the SP-404 MKII, this can be done by muting and unmuting each of the continuously looping samples and applying effects to them using the 404's effects buses. First, Assign all of the drum and bass tracks to bus 2. I will be using the reverb effect on this bus to give these instruments a bit more presence. Now let's set up our effects on bus 1. The delay is probably the most popular effect in dub music. The SP-404 Mark II has a few delay effects, and I find Kodama to be the most interesting, as it both delays and pans the audio, creating a spacey feel. I have set Kodama to be the default effect on my delay button. The phaser is another popular dub effect, and I have it set as the default on my resonator button. Finally, I will set the multi-effects button to reverb. Before you begin playing, enter mute mode and mute out all of the instruments that you don't want to play from the beginning of your song. Generally, I start with only the bass and drum sounds. When you are ready, begin playing your pattern. As the pattern plays, unmute and mute different instruments at different times and for different durations, applying your effects to them as you go along. You can let the effects linger for as long as you want. This will give a very organic feel to the dub that would be hard to recreate in a pre-programmed pattern sequence. As you can hear, the SP-404 Mark II does a nice job of replicating the workflow that a true dub producer would use. The one main limitation that we have here versus the workflow you would have on a full mixing board is that you can't assign multiple effects to one instrument at the same time on the fly. The 404's effects bus routing is somewhat limited in that manner, and my biggest wish for a future firmware update would be that there would be more bus routing options. I hope you found this demonstration interesting. There are many other effects on the SP-404 Mark II that would probably be suitable for this. The fun part about dub is that it is a very experimental and somewhat ambient genre, which lends itself to exploration of the effects on this hardware. Take care and happy beatmaking!